I'm Frank Dunn. I'm often told that my name describes me. I am Frank, and I like frank speech. I'm glad I'm not named Blunt, because I'd like to think being frank is not necessarily being insensitive or rude or nasty or unnecessarily prickly. I'll settle for doing my best to speak my mind in a way that comes through the front door, lays out where I am. My mission is to be a whole person, claiming every part of myself. And I hope to inspire others to be whole persons, claiming every part of themselves. To claim every part of ourselves, to be authentically who we are, requires honesty. If we're not going to be honest with ourselves, how are we going to be honest with anybody else? And to be honest means crossing the threshold between holding back who we are and saying who we are. The difference is that we must feel safe in order to do that. And so that's what this podcast is all about. I want to make a safe space where you can interact, question, wrestle, search for the truth. And I want your words to be as frank as mine, to be frank with each other. To be vulnerable in a safe place like this is necessary if we're going to open our hearts and minds to each other without fear of being shamed, put down, discounted, shunned, any of that. So what does it mean to claim every part of ourselves? You know as well as I that none of us gets through childhood and adolescence without learning that it's crucial to figure out how much of yourself you can allow to be seen. While some of us are courageous enough to carve out our own path, hang what others demand of us, most of us figure out pretty quickly that it's just too risky to let too much of ourselves be known. Over the years, we find that we've developed a story about ourselves that we eagerly try to live out. And meanwhile, a lot of secrets, desires, aspirations, hopes, one after another, go way down into the basement of that vast house called our unconscious. In fact, some of those things we never really were conscious of to begin with. When we have a few years on us, which can mean anything about 35 or more typically 45 or more, if the conditions for growth are present, we're ready to explore parts of ourselves that have been relegated to that basement. If we don't, chances are they will start howling like chained animals for attention. Sometimes they rise up to overpower us. Sometimes they just operate much like an incessantly barking dog or an increasingly shrill and annoying source of static. Claiming every part of ourselves doesn't mean that we're going to be public about everything. That'd be impossible. It means that we no longer live in denial. People who listen to podcasts like this are folks like you who think it might be good, maybe even a wise idea to explore how to live more fully, how to be freer, and in short, how to be happy and at peace. Although it might not be the easiest thing, I believe that we make it a lot harder than it has to be living this fuller, freer life. Still, one of the wisest things we can do is to recognize that we already have everything that we need to be whole. None of us is incapable of being whole because we already are. The issue is not that we're missing some magic ingredient or some lost piece. It's that we haven't yet awakened to ways of accepting who we are and learning to appreciate all of our different facets. Well, you're here. You're listening. And you're on some level running through your own mind how I might be talking to you. Maybe you've already had some thoughts as to what of yourself you kind of think you might need to become better acquainted with. And if so, you've come to the right place. Everything we human beings do is an expression of a story. Sometimes the story is quite personal, even trivial. Sometimes it's linked to a larger narrative that ultimately tries to explain the meaning of life. Frank words are not only my revelations, but my attempt to talk in such a way that I'm forever inviting you to become more and more familiar, increasingly comfortable with your own story. Be sure of a few things. I'm not doing this podcast to try to sell you on my approach as if you could only try it and it would work for you. I'm not here because I've come up with some great wisdom that'll save you and the rest of humanity. And I'm definitely not here to sell you some process or product as a way of feathering my own nest. I'm here to make a space for you to engage, to question, to experiment, and to reflect on parts of your life which make up your own story field. It's out of that story field that arise all the ways you understand yourself and the world you live in. You're like an orchestra with dozens of inner performers playing different parts on different instruments. Some violins may be out of tune, some flutes badly cared for, some woodwinds ignored, timpani damaged. Some may be stellar musicians with beautiful instruments. You are the conductor of your own concert. You get to invite, coach, teach, observe, listen to all the parts of the inner philharmonic that you choose to. I believe that every conductor gets more out of musicians when respecting and appreciating them, and musicians get more out of instruments that they care for and prize. It's all about love. Really? It's all about love. And the saying remains true. What the world and you and I need now is love, sweet love. It might not be the only thing that there's just too little of, but it certainly is one thing we could do with more of. And it begins right here. We're the ones whom we generally find it hardest to love. And what we find so hard to love is near enough to us that we stand a chance of learning how to practice it. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for listening to